Good morning. Welcome to Mayor's Weekly, and this morning we want to spend the entire segment talking about our upcoming paving project. And joining me is Brent McCarver, our city planner, and who has been deeply involved in bringing together the bid for the paving work, working with our engineering firm, and working with our council members to identify specific needs in their various council districts. And today we are ready to move forward. Whether we'll probably not allow that to happen for maybe another 6 weeks or whatever, but the paving folks will know when we can go forward, and the project will probably run into maybe even late fall, and there will be work done across the entire city. But I was so pleased that when we made this announcement, Brent, on our Facebook page, that we got some very, very good questions, and we tried to reach out via our Facebook page and give some answers. And but I want to touch on it here. Don't know if folks have looked back on the Facebook page to see the answers we've given, but it doesn't hurt to try to answer the questions in two different arenas. I think you do that. And Brent, what we'll do, I'm going to just lead off here with some of the questions, and we'll talk about it then as we go along. And I want to identify the riders. If you want to see the riders, you can go to our Facebook page. The city needs an ordinance that requires any work that cuts or digs up any portion of a city street and must repair the street to the same standards it was originally installed and to an area. I think that is a great recommendation. One of the things that we have to keep in mind, any cut on our streets ties to a public utility, either gas or water or sewer. Those folks have easements to service their land. You can't pass an ordinance and do away with their rights under that easement. With that easement, you got to assume the pipe and that easement was granted before we ever paved the road. Sure. And you can't pass an ordinance and take away their rights. They could probably dig it up, walk away from it, and leave us to do whatever we want to do about it. So, but we have made improvements. We have a great relationship with Jasper Waterworks and Sewer Board. Our relationship with Spire Gas has improved. They understand our expectations and understand that they don't cut our streets without us having knowledge of it. But regardless of what happens, anytime that you go out, and I don't have an engineering background, but you cut a piece of asphalt, it will never be as strong. No. As it was in its original state. And but the Jasper Waterworks and Sewer Board has a vendor that works on that and doing a reasonably good job, far and away better than what we've seen in the past. But do keep in mind that these folks just don't strike out on their own. They're traveling on an easement that's been granted to them to service their land, and you certainly cannot set that aside with a city ordinance.
Agreed.
Now, let's see what else we got. 9th Avenue is in desperate need of paving. 9th Avenue is in phase 1 paving. Brent and I have talked about this for some time. You only have to drive 9th Avenue, as I did this morning coming to work, and there are multiple failures of the paving up and down 9th Avenue. What are the contributors to that? Before my time, we had it paved, and what I'm told by the folks that were here, that we had a less than quality contractor that did the work. Then there have been certain number of cuts that have been made that may have damaged the substructure in that road that's causing the failures. So what the council authorized was a study to be done by Sane Engineering, which is probably the largest engineering company in Alabama, as to what's causing the failures. Let's give those failures whatever treatment they need, let's resurface Ninth Avenue in a way that it will serve far into the future and not have that. Brett, is that your understanding what's going to happen?
It is, yeah, and just to make sure everybody's aware, the Ninth Avenue project will roughly run from the railroad, if you want to start at that end, all the way back to 78 or Highway 118 now, in sections. It's roughly 4,677 feet of paving. So, you know, you can take that into consideration, and this is all
0.8 of a mile.
0.8 of a mile, and it's all mill and overlay. We'll take it down to the road bed, original road bed, where there were the failures, if there is compaction issues or whatever that was the problem under there, those will be repaired, and then it will be paved back with probably anywhere from I'd say 3/4 of an inch to 2 inches of paving, depending on the area that it's in around the railroad crossing.
Well, Brent, before mine and your time at the city when it was paved before, I know the folks wrecked those people's yards. It was just a big mess. Now, our work's not going to disturb anybody's yard. We're going to work between the curbs, aren't we?
We work between the curbs. And I remind everybody, kind of with a smile on my face, now what that means when we do mill and overlay, you may need to, once this starts, if you take 9th Avenue to get into town in the morning, you probably want to think about another area, because we're going to have the road, again, completely dug up and reconstructed. So
in all likelihood, this work will take place in the daytime, but
yes,
there's certainly noise associated with milling.
there is, yes.
And but better days ahead for 9th Avenue. Now, what about sidewalk light project on 19th Street from Railroad to Elliott Boulevard? That project is in its normal path toward becoming a reality. That in no way is connected to our paving project. That's a TAP project. What you do is you reach out, you make application for your grant. If you're successful in getting your grant, approval of your grant and the money don't happen on the same day.
Right.
And you get your approval, then what happens from there, then we go out, we bid the project, then we get notice that the money is available, then we move along. That project's going to happen. It's not been delayed. It's not been adversely impacted by this, but there's no way connected. So that project is real, and you'll see it happen, and it will be driven by when the money gets in our hands. It has been approved.
It has been approved, and we're also at, just keep everybody in mind, at the mercy on any type of TAP, A-TRIP, those things that you hear where there's federal and state money. We're at the mercy. It moves as fast as ALDOT and the federal government moves. So we have been approved, and we are jumping through the hoops that we need to line that work up.
Right. Now, hope Old Tuscaloosa Road gets some new paving. Talk about that, Brent. We talked about it. It's in the plan, is it not?
It is. Short of 9th Avenue, Old Tuscaloosa Road is the next largest paving project on this first phase. Roughly, it's going to run from Highway 69 to the end of the city limits. So you're talking, again, dug up, started over, reconstructed paving. It's approximately 3,800, about 3,900 feet. So again, nearly 0.8 of a mile there. Should be a whole brand new road on Old Tuscaloosa till you get outside of Jasper.
Well, and Brent, we talked about this, and the media asked us to give them a listing of the streets that were going to be paved, and what we provided was a map that marked what's going to be paved, because we could put out that, well, this is just pulling out there, that 10th Street's going to be paved. In reality, maybe only a portion of 10th Street needs attention, and then you'd have people say, well, you said 10th Street was going to be paved. May not be in its entirety. So I told Brent we're not going to build ourselves a trap door, and if you want to look at maps, you can, and we have listings of streets that will get work, but because we list a street, it doesn't necessarily mean that the street will be resurfaced in its entirety.
Right. And keep it in mind, For this phase one, I was actually just talking with Lanny before we came on. There are streets on here, and that's why I brought this little cheat sheet, because they're getting 197 feet.
Yeah.
So you're certainly not even completing a block. And you say, well, why are you doing that? Because this is only digging down to the road bed, rebuilding, reconstruction, big time,
Right.
whatever words you want to use, paving. Phase two will come back and do what we call crack seal, microsurfacing, what we say is patching. Those type things, the council, the mayor, everybody, we do say they're still needed. It's just not in phase one.
Yeah.
So you're exactly right. For us to say, 4th Avenue, 6th Street, whatever's getting paved, it may not be but 200 feet.
Yeah.
So it's better to look at the map than to say the name of the street.
Right. Well, translated, it's being smart with your paving dollars. What
Yes,
it's
sir.
about.
Very much so.
And we're
To the
getting
tune
good
of about $1
mileage
million,
there.
Mayor.
Now, a good question. Pediatric Drive, and Pediatric Drive got its name because it's in front of the pediatrician's office.
That's right.
That was our plan, to repave that. Highway 78 and 118, whichever you prefer, is a state highway. We have learned from the Alabama Department of Transportation in the not too distant future, as they tell us, their concept of time and mind sometimes don't match. But Highway 78 is going to receive some major reconfigurations in the way of access points and that sort of thing, probably starting at Airport Road and going east, if I had to guess. And what we know, based on what they have told us, is Pediatric Drive could be impacted in a way of how you access that sort of thing. So it does not make sense for us to go in and spend a lot of money paving only to have it taken out by these improvements. What I've called on our people to do is make as many repairs as we can to get past whatever the state's going to do. Then we can evaluate what needs to happen, but it just does not make sense to go in and put a new surface and then 12, 18 months down the road have it all torn up.
Correct.
So very valid point. Pediatric Drive needs attention. We recognize that, and we're going to do the best we can to get you through to the point where we know what Pediatric Drive is going to look like, and then step back and revisit that. Now here's a writer, and I can only assume at this point that they read what we pasted on Facebook, and they commingled the projects. We talked about 2 projects on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about paving. We talked about the West Jasper project.
Right.
Entirely different projects,
Yes.
entirely different funding. Scope of the work is entirely different. Why only the West Jasper School have you driven past that? Now, this West Jasper project has nothing to do with paving. It has to do with widening of streets. It has rebuilding infrastructure, that being water and sewer lines, that sort of thing, to the tune of $1,600,000 or $700,000. Then we know, and you look at the map, an awful lot of paving work is going to take place in District 4 and District 5.
Yes.
What I would say to this writer, if I'm misunderstanding what they're writing, if they could bring a little additional clarity to that, then
Right.
we'll be certainly happy to answer it. But if you look back on our Facebook page, we talked about 2 separate projects, and the West Jasper project in no way should be confused with the paving project.
No.
Right. Now, the sinkhole on Summit Drive, somebody asked about that. There's a gas line issue, water line, sewer line issue. I can't remember, maybe all of those that standing in the way of us just simply backfilling that hole and putting some cover over it. We don't want to rupture the lines, and the proper authorities have been made aware of that, and as soon as whatever needs to be done by those folks that own those lines, water, sewer, gas, to ensure that they're protected as we solve this problem, we'll do it. So it has not been forgotten about, not being neglected, but the folks, like I said, responsible for the water, gas, and sewer lines, that that sinkhole is over and around when they do whatever work, and they give us clearance to come back in and fill the sinkhole and whatever, that will happen. So please know that we haven't forgotten about that. Now, Brent, and we said we always welcome your questions. These are some of the better questions that I've seen on a project, and we're so pleased to answer those kind of questions. People are entitled to know. Right. But Brent, what as we wrap up here, what you might add about the paving project? We, as we mentioned, I think I mentioned in the paper how we decided on the work to be done. We relied on our engineering firm to make evaluations. Our engineering firm, and you were part of that, consulted with our various council members, being 5 of them, identifying needs in the various council districts. And so that's how we got to phase one. Now, one thing that I do want to point out, pointed out in the paper, that we bid this work just inside of a year ago. It came in at $3.1 million. We tweaked the scope of work. There's been petroleum prices have subsided somewhat. I think the paper said a better outlook for the economy helped us. A better outlook for the economy would probably hurt us. An outlook of a less than rosary economy probably helped us in that they may be going into a recession, and certainly companies want to garner as much work as they can to do that. So all of those things helped us. We rebid the work from 3.1 down to $2.9 million. So $1.1 million plus reduction. And what that does, we set aside $5 million in the 4-point plan. That means that that we can have a very viable phase 2 and maybe a smaller phase 3.
Exactly. That is the plan. And one thing, I actually had a meeting yesterday with our engineers, and they stressed to us, for it to be phase 1, the mill and overlay, we actually did not remove any of the original planned work. The savings is because you and the council didn't take the first plan and waited until the time was right to let it again. We've not lost any work. We did legitimately just save money on the process. And also,
you know what, I know this, and my simple math tells me if you can save $1 million, you saved a lot of money. You do that a few times, and you saved a whole lot of money.
That's significant. And also, Mayor, I should have said it earlier, the roads like Pediatric Drive, where we have made decisions to put those into a different phase, that work hasn't been taken out. That's actually going to move, as a matter of fact, that work's going to move over to the Blackwell Meadows area. And so, again, as we do make any tweaks to this, best way to think of it, we're paying for labor and materials. So if we don't do one road, it gives us the opportunity to move to another area.
Right. And the taxpayer gets the full benefit of the money allocated for phase 1, and then we know resting safely in the bank is money for phase 2, where we double back on these projects that maybe we had to skip over for reasons such as Pediatric Drive. People, phase 2 is probably a 2024 project just because of weather. When do you envision? Of course, the first thing we got to do is we got to set up the scope of work in phase 2.
We'll have the pre-construction meeting for phase 1 coming up soon, and then if you're going to force us into a box, just think about April to October for this phase one. Somewhere in there is where this work will fall and complete. We will probably be, again, met with the engineers and AlDOT yesterday. We'll probably be getting into phase two, setting it all up and putting the bids out in the fall to look at doing the work in the spring. So you're looking at probably the same type of schedule we have with phase one.
Yeah.
Just sort of depending on when we wrap up this, the West Jasper project. We had several other things, sidewalk projects, things like that.
I'm gonna say this, and this has a self-serving flavor, but that's not my intention. A city our size to be able to do $5 million worth of paving, and that stacks on top of us having done almost $8 million worth of paving at the start of this administration. So, we're talking about when this is all done, we've spent over $13 million paving roads in Jasper, Alabama.
Right.
And I'm proud of that.
Yeah. Well, this project alone, this total reconstruction right here is going to represent, as far as, again, length or however you want to talk about it, in the 15 to 20% of the roads in the town of Jasper are in this project.
Yeah.
You've already done basically 75%
Yeah.
of them. Of course, there's been time elapsed, but, also a town our size to have 4 major infrastructure projects going this summer.
Yeah.
From West Jasper to the eastern city limits. It's pretty significant. AlDOT mentioned that yesterday.
Did they?
Yeah.
That's, well, we're gonna stay on that page, and I've talked about this, and I want to touch on it again. We're doing the paving right. I've used this a lot, political paving. That's a half-inch thick and a mile wide that doesn't last, whatever we do. And what we can see, what we did in the paving project a few years back, those wearing surfaces are holding up very well, as I see it. You agree?
They are. Sure. They really are.
Good, good. So that's the summary of the paving project. Again, I commend you for good questions, not something that's unrelated or has some kind of a poison flavor. And we love to answer those kind of questions. And if you have other questions, and maybe what we said this morning stimulates questions, please send them our way, and we'll give them attention and as soon as we receive them.
Yes, sir.
All right. Glad to have you with us.